Hello, welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. It's an odd week, the week between Christmas and New Year's. And Christmas is still officially with us, but we've almost begun to leave it. People have begun to take decorations down, even in some places. In some places, they'll be left up until, Twelfth night, January 6th. And I've known people who have left their trees up well beyond that. But the sense of time, the sense of being in the middle of time, some time, trying to figure out what time it is, this week, trying to understand and remember what day it is, all force their way onto us. Having any kind of sense of time at all gives human beings kind of a perspective. And today I want to draw our attention to a psalm in, of course, the Bible. That's where you find the Psalms. Psalm 90, which is one that expresses a very sharp, very deep, very developed awareness of time. It's not a psalm that speaks of time as past, present, and future, so much as it speaks of time on three very different levels. And those levels kind of nest inside one another. Let's hear the psalm before I go further. It says this: Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn us back to dust and say, turn back, you mortals. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it's past, or like a watch in the night. You sweep them away. They're like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning, it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening, it fades and withers. For we're consumed by your anger. By your wrath, we're overwhelmed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins, in the light of your countenance. For all our days pass away under your wrath. Our years come to an end like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, perhaps 80 if our strength holds. Even then, their span is only toil and trouble. They're soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger? Your wrath is great as the fear that is due you. So teach us to count our days, that we may gain a wise heart. Turn, O Lord, how long? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you've afflicted us, and as many years as we've seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and prosper for us the work of our hands. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. There's a lot in that psalm. A lot. On the widest scale, It talks about time. Well, actually, not even time. It talks about eternity, pre time and post time, with time in the middle of it. That sounds like a time sandwich. I don't mean it that way, but you have to try to think of it somehow. And it's not easy because we only exist within that period of time, and yet God is before creation. And when God makes creation, God makes time. The creation story talks about creating day and night, creating the seasons, creating those things that we use to mark out the passage of time. But even without those things, there would be time. But we don't know how to even say that there was a time before there was time. It's not just before, it's kind of, well, before is a term that has to do with consequential happenings. This happens, then that happens, then the next thing happens. It's beyond us. It's something so hard for the mind to wrap itself around that we stumble and we trip over our own language just in an attempt to express something that we feel instinctively. Toward the end of the novel by Umberto Eco, The Name of the Rose, there is a passage in which the narrator, um, who in the story is only a young teenager, but by this time has lived his life and has seen a lot and is looking back and describing it all. And that young teenager has become an elderly monk. And he's looking at his own transition from time into eternity. And he ponders it and says this: I shall soon enter this broad desert, perfectly smooth and boundless, where the truly pious heart succumbs in bliss. So far, so good. Uh, Almost like a traditional thought about heaven. But he knows it's deeper than that. And he tries to say what he means. He says, I shall sink into the divine shadow, in a dumb silence and an ineffable union. And in this sinking, all equality and all inequality shall be lost. And in that abyss, my spirit will lose itself and will not know the equal or the unequal or anything else. And all differences will be forgotten. I shall be in the simple foundation, in the silent desert where diversity is never seen, in the privacy where no one finds himself in his proper place. I shall fall into the silent and uninhabited divinity where there's no work and no image. He's tried to say what he's looking ahead to. And he's talking about it as the vastness, the eternity that is God himself, that uninhabited divinity. Probably it is not either spiritually or mentally healthy as a general practice, at least for some people, to dwell on that kind of thought, at least not for too long. It can really mess your head up if you try to think about it, is what I'm saying. Uh, but one of the weird things that is observable, I would say, is that the people that are most liable to get mixed up by all of that, maybe mixed up in all of that or mixed up with all of that, again, words fail us. Those are the people that are most drawn to that kind of contemplation. The psalmist recognizes that that kind of eternity exists. But he puts his own meditation more succinctly. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever had been formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, he says, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. It's almost like a shrug. I can think about this stuff, I can try to make sense out of it, but in the long term, you're God and I'm not. And you've always been God and you'll always be God, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And it might best be the way to go, simply to leave thoughts of eternity at that. It exists. In Psalm 90, however, there's a second kind of awareness of time that connects to eternity, but in a less philosophical way. And it's another way in which we as human beings relate to the ancientness of creation. Not what happened before God created, but the vastness and even the deep age of the creation that God has set us in the midst of. And for us, it's one thing, but for God, it's another. God's eternal nature makes even the depths of created time seem like nothing. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it's past, or like a watch in the night. And yet we've all had that kind of awareness for ourselves, a kind of awareness that brings with it a sense of awe. Think about what it means if you were to look up into the night sky on a clear night and a dark night, one without a lot of light pollution around, so that you could see the stars, and you saw suddenly a big bright flash of light that came from a galaxy far, far away, a galaxy that had exploded. Not just a star that had gone supernova, but millions of stars that were being blown apart, releasing such incredible brightness into the universe that it was just now coming to your attention and you can't ignore it. That does not mean that that galaxy has just blown apart. It means that the light from that has just reached us. And what was a flash of brilliant energy, billions and billions and billions or trillions and trillions of years ago, is now just coming to our attention. It's light associated with a moment that after that incredible period of time was just reaching us across all that distance. And to God, that's just a split second. Let's put it in smaller terms. We can look at a big oak or redwood or a sequoia and see in that a living organism that's been around so long that a human lifespan is a matter of a few rings of growth for that tree. We look at a fruit fly or a gnat, and its entire life is like that to us. To one of these trees, if they could conceive of such things, our lives would go away in the moment that a gnat goes away to us. And to God, the lifespan of a redwood, or even the time that entire worlds exist, is nothing but that of a snowflake landing on a campfire. The days of our lives are 70 years, perhaps 80 if we're strong. Even then, their span is only toil and trouble. They're soon gone, and we fly away. To recognize that is to feel awe for the Eternal One. Even if we only think about things that happen within time, even things that happen within our own lifetime, they're over and done with. For God, everything is like that. Maybe? But then again, the Bible talks about how God does intervene in our lives, how he numbers the hairs of our heads, how God understands the fall of a sparrow. And the one who is eternal, and the one to whom eternity, ages rather, are nothing, also understands the most particular moment. And so it's not up to us to look at our lives and say, they come to nothing after all. They're just toil and trouble. What can any of it mean to God? Instead, it's even more amazing to say that given God is God and we are not, God still cares and understands about things in the kind of focus that we have, and on our level too, and even on a more particular level. And so, for us, the time that we have is the time that we are to be concerned with, set within that greater setting. The things that we do now, the way we treat the earth, is going to have repercussions for millennia to come. The way we act now will echo in the lives of generations after us. That's true. And at the same time, the things that we have and the things that we do within our lives affect how our lives roll on into the future. So it matters. It matters greatly that we take care of the time that we have, that we use the time that we have with careful deliberation and use it in ways that make us better people. This awareness that we can have sometimes of the shortness, the relative shortness of our lives, forces us to ask how best to use it, how best to sort of ration the hours and the minutes and the seconds. Five for Fighting had a hit song back in the year 2004, which, as of this weekend, will be a mere 20 years in the past. But that doesn't seem possible. Fittingly enough, that song is called 100 Years. The lyrics say this: I'm 15 for a moment, caught in between 10 and 20, and I'm just dreaming, counting the ways to where you are. I'm 22 for a moment. She feels better than ever, and we're on fire making our way back from Mars. 15, there's still time for you, time to buy and time to lose. 15, there's never a wish better than this, when you've only got 100 years to live. I'm 33 for a moment, still the man, but you see, I'm a kid on the way, baby, a family on my mind. I'm 45 for a moment, the sea is high, and I'm heading into a crisis, chasing the years of my life. 15, there's still time for you. Time to buy, time to lose yourself within a morning star. 15, I'm all right with you. 15, there's never a wish better than this, when I only have 100 years to live. Half time goes by. Suddenly, you're wise. Another blink of an eye, 67 is gone. The sun is getting high. We're moving on. I'm 99 for a moment, dying for just another moment. And I'm just dreaming, counting the ways to where you are. 15, there's still time for you. 22, I feel her too. 33, you're on your way. Every day's a new day. 15, there's time for you. Time to buy and time to choose. Hey, 15, there's never a wish better than this, when I only have 100 years to live. Again, though, back to Psalm 90, where the psalmist who shares that kind of awareness and knows that it can make someone almost frantic sometimes. The psalmist, knowing that, doesn't panic, doesn't say, I've only got 100 years, but turns, even saying, I've only got 70 or 80 years. And he turns to God, the Eternal One, the Ancient of Days, as the Bible sometimes calls him. And the psalmist simply asks that the passage of time would not ultimately be a pointless matter, but that within the time we are given, God would establish our works, would do something with the things that we do, would build on what we build. Whether that time is a 70-year span, an 80-year span, or a span of generations, what we do ends up being placed within God's hands no matter what. And so while we are here, and in the time that we have, we ourselves come to a kind of fullness, the fullness of time. Living well here and now is part of a wider span, a wider project. God's plan for humanity, God's plan for creation, God's plan for eternity. And we'll get there. And in fact, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we had first begun. Amen.